Hey everyone, I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill, and I will be hosting Dinesh's podcast while he's away this week. He's actually in Australia with Tucker Carlson doing a really cool tour. So I am very jealous that he gets to explore Australia, and all the people there are going to get this amazing tour. So I will be here this week. And if you don't know me already, I'm Dinesh's daughter, and I've hosted the podcast before in the past, so you may have heard me then. I'm also the author of 2 books, The Choice, The Abortion Divided America, and Why God, an Intelligent Discussion on the Relevance of Faith. The best way you can find me is to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, True Social, all the places. I'm on X. I'm at Danielle D'Souza Gill. That's where you can find my content, videos, all those things. Today, we have a lot to get to. We are going to be asking the question, is Trump winning over young voters? We'll talk about a lot of recent news. We'll talk about his speech at Turning Point in Detroit. We'll also speak with Gavin Wax, president of the New York Young Republican Club. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Mainstream media would have us believe that the recent convictions of Donald Trump and Hunter Biden are examples of a fair justice system, twin cautionary tales showing no one is above the law. Hooray! They warble gleefully. Hunter Biden's been convicted. In a reaction that should have Hunter contemplating his overall utility for his father's reelection, the media is triumphantly declaring over and over again that the system works. No one is above the law. See, look at both sides. They tell us our justice system, flawed though it may be, is still a functional institution, unbiased and committed to fairness. Allow me to put off hanging the celebratory bunting and banners just yet. Saying Hunter's 3 guilty verdicts somehow vindicate our Ministry of Lawfare is a lot like saying the recent deportations of ISIS-aligned Tajik nationals somehow vindicates the dismantling of our southern border. For starters, let's talk about who is not implicated in this case. And that is the big guy, Joe Biden. Then let's talk about what is implicated in Hunter Biden's decades-long association with shell companies, funneling Chinese Communist Party money into his own bank account. Again, that would be Joe Biden. Evidence and analysis point to Hunter's unambiguous role as the Biden crime family bagman. In its investigation of the Biden family's influence peddling schemes, the House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Accountability has determined the Bidens and their associates have collected over $20 million. That's right, $20 million in payments from foreign entities. Through subpoenaed records, the committee has thus far uncovered a dizzying number of, to put it mildly, suspicious payments, all enriching the Biden family coffers. Now, here it goes. $3 million from Romania, $8 million from China, $142,000 from Kazakhstan, $6.5 million from Ukraine, $3.5 million to Russia. And that is just for starters. So, of all the heinous criminal acts documented and recorded on the laptop, in bank records and in business documents, the DOJ comes for the 2-bit crime of document falsification. And in the end, the man who brought the charges, Special Counsel David Weiss, waxes poetically about how Hunter is just some poor Dickensian waif, heroically battling his demons. Poor Hunter. Weiss says his prosecution of the president's son was not just about addiction, a disease that haunts families across the United States. It was about the illegal choices the defendant made while in the throes of addiction. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made him dangerous. Of course, it was the guns and the drugs that made him do it. Nevertheless, the media tells us these 2 historic cases must be seen as evidence that Lady Justice is blind. Despite these attempts to link the convictions in the public's collective consciousness, people are not convinced. Polls from the global marketing research firm Ipsos have the company lamenting in a recent headline that, quote, the Hunter Biden verdict doesn't move Americans. I think they're desensitized to it by now. The ISPOS website insists both cases are historic firsts for the country. The website helpfully explains that never has a sitting president's child been found guilty of a crime while he was in office. Never has a former president and current major presidential candidate been deemed a convicted felon. See, they're the same. No one is above the law. Even though the left is using the Hunter case to make the "we're so disinterested and nobody is above the law" argument to justify their cases against Trump, people continue to balk at the forced, ham-fisted comparison. Definitely isn't moving Republicans, but is it moving independents? Generally speaking, when assessing the state of our judicial system, people naturally look at those charged with similar offenses or those who acted similarly, but were treated with different levels of harshness in the same situation. For example, compare the consequences for two men convicted of contempt of Congress, Steve Bannon and Eric Holder. Steve Bannon, a top advisor during Trump's first presidential campaign and a senior White House aide, was convicted of contempt of Congress in 2022 for failing to provide documents and testify to the House Select Committee that investigated the January 6th protests at the U.S. Capitol. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison, and he will report to jail on July 1st. In 2012, Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder, was convicted of contempt of Congress for his failure to provide testimony and turn over documents related to the Fast and Furious gun-running scandal. Yet, he received no punishment whatsoever. Take as another example, Biden and Clinton and their classified document mishandling being treated as not worthy of any punishment, while with deadly force authorized against him and his home raided by heavily armed SWAT teams. Trump has had the book thrown at him for allegedly mishandling classified materials. Add to that the fact that Trump was president when the supposed misstep occurred, and the difference in these two situations, the difference in the consequences, is hard to explain. According to the 1988 Supreme Court case, Department of Navy versus Egan, the president, quote, has the authority to classify and control access to information. This is so because, as noted in the majority opinion, the president's authority, quote, flows primarily from a constitutional investment of power and exists quite apart from any explicit congressional grant. In other words, when people subordinate to the president, declaring something to be classified, they do so only because the president, as commander-in-chief, has delegated that authority to them. The power to classify or declassify ultimately resides with the president. Neither Joe Biden nor Hillary Clinton enjoyed such broad powers to declassify materials, and yet neither was punished for their egregious misuse of classified documents. Now, finally, consider the different ways the political protesters at the Capitol on June 1st, 2020 have been prosecuted compared to the shock and awe campaign mounted against the protesters at the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. In 2020, during a protest on the Capitol grounds over the death of George Floyd, the iconic St. John's Church, built in 1816, was burned down, and Donald Trump and his family had to be evacuated from the White House. Most protesters at this event, if they were prosecuted at all, received a mere slap on the wrist. This despite the fact that their activities and protests went on for weeks during what has been dubbed the Summer of Love, with its, quote, mostly peaceful protests. But look at the January 6thers, on the other hand, most of whom left the Capitol by the 6 p.m. curfew, are still being arrested years later, and to date, so many have been arrested that they have their own special wing of the Washington, D.C. jail, all dedicated to their incarceration. No matter which side you support, you cannot help but see that the criminal justice system is treating similar actions, actually some worse, very differently, making their actions seem like they weren't as bad. They're being treated differently based on the supposed offender's political affiliations. It's enough to make you think the only reason Hunter was charged in the first place is because Biden's campaign managers have recognized that their narrative is already stretching past the breaking point. Kindly pardon me, establishment media, if I point out that for most of us, your narrative fell apart years ago. The disparities and consequences are so notable that even if you think the sentences, the fake punishments are fair, the differences cannot be denied. As Newt Gingrich told Politico recently, many Americans are afraid that we are on the edge of a tyrannical dictatorship of the left using the FBI and the courts to oppress anyone whose politics differ from the party line. That is why no one is buying the leftist narrative that Trump is being prosecuted, because in the United States, no one is above the law. During Trump's presidency, the left told us what they were going to do, and then they did exactly that. They followed through on their actions. And if you try to imagine what this country would look like if the government suddenly decided to do everything it could to take out a real threat to the status quo, you have to ask yourself if it would look any different from what we are seeing going on today. Leftists once again tell us not to believe our eyes and ears, but that's a little hard to do after they've spent the better part of a decade saying the quiet part out loud. So we won't believe their fear-mongering about the state of our republic, as if democracy is on the line, should Trump pull an election victory in November. The reality is, we are already in danger with Biden as president. Trump's campaign is gaining momentum because he's being punished unfairly for his politics, just as other conservatives have been persecuted for their political beliefs and pro-lifers for their Christian and pro-life beliefs. The media insists the national strife we're seeing is the result of a deep political divide. In actuality, it's not politics that divides us, it's memory. And for the left, they are quick to forget all of the things that they have been doing to us.
You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, and so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. Now, when Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company, just the pillow, but with the help of his dedicated employees, Mike now has hundreds of products, some of which you may not even know about. So to get the word out, I want to invite my viewers and listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. 6-pack towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, $25. And for the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. By the way, orders over $75 get free shipping as well. The amazing offer won't last long, so act now. Call 800-876-0227. The number again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. Make sure to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. I want to talk to you about a hearing aid. You know how amazing it is to be able to hear a conversation for the first time in years? We've had the pleasure of witnessing MD Hearing Aid's ability to help people we love. Both my mother-in-law and her caretaker wear them and love them. They also love how small and discreet they are. MD Hearing is a FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid that costs a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. MD Hearing's brand new XS model costs over 90% less than clinic hearing aids. That's incredible. MD Hearing was founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of his patients needed hearing aids but couldn't afford them. He made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid anyone could afford. MD Hearing has sold over 1.5 million hearing aids, and they offer a 45-day risk-free trial with a 100% money-back guarantee, so you can buy with confidence. Get the hearing you deserve with MD Hearing. Go to shopmdhearing.com. Use promo code Dinesh to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. Plus, they are adding a free extra charging case, a $100 value just for my listeners. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use promo code Dinesh. Get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer.
There is a Chestertonian adage regarding the role of tradition in culture. In it, G.K. Chesterton likens tradition to a fence. Along comes a progressive who wants to remove that fence on the grounds that because it's old, it is an unnecessary barrier to progress. Not so fast, Chesterton warns. Even though we may not see or understand what that fence restrains, it's foolish to assume it was constructed for no good reason. Take that fence down, and you may never be able to put it back into place. After all, fences are as much about keeping things out as they are about keeping things in. The fence could very well have been put there for our safety. We're roughly a century on from that metaphor, and it's safe to say our society has dismissed that wisdom and dismantled all fences. All around us lay the discarded fence posts of various traditions, and as many monsters now freely rampage about our civilization. For the sake of the convenience afforded by abortion, we have discarded traditional values concerning the preciousness of human life. We are fighting to bring this back. But what has happened as a result? Our doctors now push experimental drugs for big pharma kickbacks, while in Canada, clinician-performed murder is being touted as the new cure-all. We decried church involvement in education, separating the two, and now amoral children run over strangers for fun. We elevated follow your bliss to a cardinal virtue, and now school districts seek to sexualize curriculum for younger and younger children. Everywhere we look, there's a new monster set loose by our mindless hatred of tradition and traditional values. But not all the monsters we've freed are so easy to glimpse. They may be growing in strength in the background, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves while we are distracted by these other monsters. One indicator that something monstrous is afoot is a recent jobs report which shows women outpacing men in employment. This is easy to glance over. The jobless rate for women at 3.2 is close to the jobless rate for Asians, which at 3.1 is the lowest. But the rate for men is 3.7, much higher than even the highest racial group for joblessness, namely whites. Is 0.6 really that much of a cause for worry, you might think? Well, yes, it is, because those stats don't include a lot of other categories that could also count as unemployed. Those numbers are much worse. In 2022, the New York Post reported on the phenomenon of the NILF, N-I-L-F, meaning people not in the labor force. Over the years, there has been a massive rise in NILFs among working-age men. According to the Post, fully 7.2 million such men had left the workforce by the beginning of last year. And this is not some leftover ramification of the COVID shutdown. There's an excess of 4 million more unfilled jobs in the post-COVID market compared to the pre-COVID market. Currently, for every employed male of prime working age, there are 4 NILFs of the same age who've checked out of the workforce. The number of prime age male NILFs today exceeds 1965 levels by 3.5 times. These are disturbing trends. Many of these men have truly checked out of society altogether. They're glued to their screens, they're living vicariously with 45% using pain medication to muffle their bitter realities. What exactly is the cause here? Well, Epoch Times economics expert Jeffrey A. Tucker wrote a column about what he called the Great Inflation. He notes that gender discrimination wasn't a big problem going back as far as the 1920s. It's just that back then, women dropped out of the workforce after marriage, after having children to take care of their kids. However, in 1985, two-income households long-term became the norm. Tucker says that change was necessitated by a 43% increase in the money supply, which decimated the value of the dollar and dealt a devastating blow to the nation's standard of living. In order to distract from that disaster, says Tucker, dual-income households were touted as a success story for women. It was a propaganda move to paper over the nationwide pillaging of our savings and disposable income and the ability to live on one income. In other words, the beast kept at bay by traditional gender roles was deliberately set loose as a diversion for bad money policy. The end result is our society now embraces a culture that doesn't just rejoice in the disenfranchisement of working men, while at the same time ignoring the economics that have more and more of us living paycheck to paycheck. It forces women to take on these roles. Tucker notes, we're seeing population-wide demoralization, ill health, lack of ambition, substance abuse, and widespread despair. However this ends, it isn't going to be good. It's an ironic word choice because only good can end this travesty. Good as in the moral good. Re-embracing concepts of personal morality, reminding the Fed that theft is a sin, and returning to traditional family lifestyles. Ultimately, we need to do a better job of defending our traditions because they protect us and help our families. A checked out, self-involved, drug-addicted workforce isn't going to give us the progress our movies predict, whether it's colonizing Mars or mining asteroids. Such a disengaged citizenry certainly isn't going to revitalize American small businesses. The ironic truth revealed by the lies of progressivism is that we desperately need to jettison the failed ideas of the left if we hope to ever make true progress in any field. Our ancestors, in their wisdom, have already shown us how to keep monsters at bay. All we have to do is follow their lead. In other words, the only way forward is for us to go back. If we continue down the path that we're on, we are surely headed for destruction.
The hardest part about weight loss? Getting started. But once you get started, you'll be so happy you did. Are you ready to lose weight but not sure where to start? I understand. Debbie and I were right where you are a year and a half ago. Let me tell you why we chose PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition and why I so highly recommend their program. First, Dr. Ashley Lucas has her PhD in chronic disease and sports nutrition. Her program is based on years of research. It's science-based. Second, the PhD program starts with nutrition, but it's so much more. They know that 90% of permanent change comes from the mind, and they work on eliminating the reason you gain this weight in the first place. There are no shortcuts, no pills, no injections, just solid science-based nutrition and behavior change. And finally, probably most important, it works. I lost 27 pounds, Debbie lost 25. We haven't gained the weight back. The best thing about this program, they have an 85% success rate of their clients maintaining their weight loss for life. They provide elevated maintenance support for you through the PhD alumni community, which will give you the support you need to keep this weight loss off forever. So if you're ready to lose weight for the last time, call 864-644-1900 to get started. You can also go online at myphdweightloss.com. Do what we did, do what hundreds of my listeners and viewers have done. Call today. It's 864-644-1900. Have you heard about the groundbreaking film hitting theaters nationwide this summer? Get ready for The Relentless Patriot. It's a captivating documentary by Global Ascension Studios, Hollywood's first ever conservative movie studio, headed by Joshua Macchiello. This isn't your average documentary. It's a powerful tribute to American patriotism and activism, following Scott Lobido's remarkable journey from stirring flag renditions to outspoken advocacy for our service members. Scott's story is one of unwavering dedication and unfiltered passion. Join the movement on June 13th for the special release of The Relentless Patriot. Experience Scott's journey, feel the pulse of American patriotism. Don't miss this unforgettable cinematic experience. Mark your calendars. Be part of history with The Relentless Patriot. Brought to you by Global Ascension Studios.
I am delighted to welcome our guest today, Gavin Wax. He's the president of the New York Young Republican Club. Gavin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Danielle. It's great to be here.
Of course. Well, first of all, congratulations on your baby coming soon. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. Due in September.
Thank you. I just celebrated my first Fathers-to-be Day yesterday, which was great. So big times ahead. Very excited.
Wow. Well, that's such great news. So Gavin, okay, I want to ask you. So were you in New York during the time of the Trump trial, and were you there when the verdict came out?
I was, yes.
What was that like?
Listen, I think being in Manhattan, you definitely are behind enemy lines, and you definitely see a lot of, hear and see a lot of sentiment from the left, and I'm definitely exposed to that often, especially on breaking news days like that with the verdict. But I think the city as a whole, New York State as a whole, I think there was a groundswell of support for the president, and the tide is turning against what many see as a politicized prosecution, persecution, however you want to call it. We've seen some polls come out that show that President Trump's margins in New York continue to tighten, even with news of this conviction. But it was a sad day. It was a sad day for the country. It was a sad day for the city and the state, a city and state that he grew up in, that he helped build in many ways. And we're all hoping for better things to come this November, a sort of vindication against this, complete runaway, Democrat lawfare that's been destroying this country, dividing this country, and completely, trampling on all the norms that we have taken for granted for centuries.
Yeah. Wow. I've seen some polling recently, at least who knows how legitimate this is, but according to Politico, 43% of Americans believe the prosecution was brought on to help Biden. Do you see that number increasing as we get closer to the election? How do you feel like people are kind of processing this also when the left is saying, oh, look, Hunter Biden is also kind of being held to account for his crimes, even though not really? How do you think that this is going to affect maybe some independent voters?
Well, it's a good question. I'll start with the Hunter Biden element. There's certainly a narrative being spun, and the talking points went out following the news with the Hunter Biden case, trying to make it seem, there's still, just one standard of justice, and everything is, an even playing field. No one's above the law, that kind of nonsense. First off, his real most serious crimes involved the corruption, the money, Ukraine, Burisma. This gun charge in Delaware was like the lowest of the low on the totem pole, to be quite honest. His crimes were far more serious, and there were other crimes beyond just the corruption. I mean, the things that had to do with drugs and hookers and all the rest. So he's still getting a slap on the wrist. The enormity of the evidence against Hunter Biden, the enormity of the amount of crimes that he effectively admitted to with what was found on his laptop, just goes to show that they're only going after him because they were forced to. They're only going after him, and they still tried to stop this, by the way. They were trying to prevent this from happening. It's not like they just let the justice system work out. They were actively trying to thwart any kind of investigation or prosecution into Hunter Biden. But despite all of that, they were forced into doing this because it just became such an enormous pile, an enormous mound of evidence against him. So these are not comparable situations. When you look at President Trump's prosecution, many people rightly see this as a victimless crime. It's a paperwork error, if anything. It's never been prosecuted before. It's a novel legal theory. They had to twist and stretch and contort the law in order to even justify this prosecution, looking at things like the statute of limitations and the very nature of this supposed underlying crime. Everything about the President Trump's prosecution in New York was a complete travesty of justice. I think most Americans are seeing that. That's reflected in the polling, where despite, this latest news of the conviction, he still remains the clear leader in all of these nationwide and statewide polls, and that those numbers are only continuing to improve, especially the further we get out from the actual sentencing. So whatever momentary bump the Democrats may have had from this conviction, it's already fading, and this just goes to show their lawfare has backfired on them across the board. When the original indictments came down in all those federal cases, he saw polling bumps. Now all those federal cases and the case in Georgia are all basically falling apart at the seams. This New York case was the only one that seems to have been able to proceed before the election. It was the weakest of the cases. It was the most politicized by many means, by many ways to describe it, of all of these different cases. So I think most Americans now are waking up. They're seeing this for what it is, and they're seeing the country that they grew up in change radically, and the institutions that they once trusted are falling apart at the seams because of this left-wing political domination.
Tell us about young people in New York and all over that you're leading. Do you feel like they are also seeing what is happening to President Trump and are seeing kind of the double standard with what's happening to Hunter Biden? Do you think that, Trump is definitely making some inroads? He spoke this weekend at Turning Point Action in Detroit. I feel like a lot of young people, especially who are Democrats, are probably disappointed in Biden because they're so left-wing. They feel like Biden hasn't catered to them enough. And yet at the same time, he's actually been extremely radical. But I guess they feel like he's disappointed them. And yet we have President Trump reaching new people. So how do you kind of make sense of where this is going to come as far as the younger generation?
I think you make some great points, and it's a great question. I mean, I'll start off by saying, young people in general are becoming more radical, either to the left or to the right. They're shifting from the center, and that's a consequence of being a lost generation in many ways, not having the same economic opportunities as their parents and grandparents. They're struggling to start families, to buy homes, to start businesses, to move up the corporate ladder, to make as much money as they once did. They're struggling under debt, a lack of opportunity, cultural, religious, spiritual disillusionment. A lot of the worst vices and issues facing the Western world are only amplified with the younger generations because they're more susceptible to the brunt of these problems that are now being thrown onto the American people and other countries across the world. So with that said, I think many have become disillusioned. They were promised a lot of things with Biden, like they were promised by Obama and others before them, and other state and local Democrats who offer a lot and fail to deliver on those promises. So I think many are becoming disillusioned with that, particularly under this inflation and this kind of economic stagnation. I think on the other hand, you have an issue that you illustrated, that many of the younger, more left-wing radicals are not content with the supposed ideological direction of Biden. They still think that he's too much of a moderate. You and I could laugh at that, but that is a sentiment that's felt among some of the more left-wing radicals, the younger left-wing radicals in the party, particularly as it comes to issues like Israel, Palestine, and maybe the green agenda and more left-wing socialist views. In many ways, the Democrat Party is becoming the party of big business. They're becoming the party of the globalists. They're becoming the party of the establishment, the established order, concentrated wealth, Hollywood, all the rest, the elites. So there are still some, idealistic left-wing youths, if I can say that, who probably see Biden as more of a corporate shill, and there's some truth to that. So they're certainly become disillusioned. And then you have many others on the right, or many people in the center, who are moving towards President Trump. They're moving towards the right. They see, his administration as being one of economic prosperity. They're seeing that he's offering a different sort of direction. They're recognizing as they get older that many of the things that they were spun by the media, by their educational system, by, popular culture are not exactly true. And you see among even the youngest generation, the Zoomers, the ones that are conservative, the ones that do identify as Republican, they're the most conservative within that cohort. So if you have a Republican, conservative Zoomer, Gen Z, they're particularly conservative, far more than millennials or boomers or any other generation before them. So you're seeing that radicalization. And I think, President Trump is making a very strong economic message, economic appeal to young voters, trying to get them back on their 2 feet, giving them a future, giving them prosperity, not promising them, decades of stagnation and foreign conflict and war, which is basically what the Democrats are offering. They're basically wanting to send off young people to go fight in foreign wars, and they want to, rob them of their treasure and prosperity here at home. So continuing to hit home that dichotomy, which President Trump is doing, is only going to lead to better results, growing results within young voters. And the polls reflect that. He's doing better than he ever has with younger voters, and that's continuing to trend in his direction, particularly as he does things on pop culture and things, with Logan Paul and all these different podcasts. Going to the UFC. I mean, he's a cultural icon. He's leaning into that. And I think that's also helping him and cement his image with younger voters.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not even close comparing Trump and Biden in terms of ability to, relate to people, tell jokes. Biden, I mean, we can talk about that later. Obama leading Biden off of the stage. He's unable to find his way at this Democrat fundraiser. But you mentioned economic policies. So Trump brought up the idea of no income tax and eliminating income tax and instead doing tariffs. So do you feel like that might be something that would resonate with young people? I feel like a lot of young people, they may be liberal, and then they realize once they graduate from college, get their paychecks, they're like, wait, why am I giving away all this money to the government? So what do you think about that proposed policy idea?
Well, this was music to my ears. I love to hear it. I'm a protectionist. I'm a tariff man. It's kind of the central plank of the populist movement within the Republican Party. And frankly, the Republican Party was always the party of the protective the protectionist tariff. And for most of our country's history, basically up until the end of World War II, our government was primarily funded by tariffs, not direct taxation on American citizens and American businesses. So I think this is a great strategy. We have some ridiculous, our tax code is this behemoth. It's this monstrosity. It's this Byzantine bureaucratic mess. It costs so much just to comply and understand the code. And then you get to the rates themselves, which are quite high, especially when you factor in state and local taxes, that, our income tax burden is ridiculous for a supposedly free market capitalist country. There are many other countries across the world, Europe, Asia, wherever it may be, even Latin America, where they have far lower marginal tax rates than us on incomes and even businesses and corporations. So we are not competitive from a tax standpoint. That's even after Trump's original round of tax cuts. So I think this is a great suggestion, moving government revenue from taxing American citizens onto taxing imports. And, I think this is basically designed to increase production, to reshore industries, to incentivize people to produce here at home. It creates a litany of new jobs. It puts more money in America in the pockets of the American people. I think this is a great idea. It's also going to destroy a lot of wasteful spending that goes into just complying with the tax code. It's not just the tax rates, it's how much money you have to spend either as an individual or businesses on tax compliance, which in and of itself is another massive expense and drag on the economy. I think this is going to be a tough thing to push forward, and I don't know if it's going to happen overnight, but I think we should certainly do another round of Trump tax cuts where we slash rates aggressively, both income and corporate, and make up for some revenue shortfalls with tariffs. Obviously, we also need to cut spending as well, but when and where there are some revenue shortfalls because of any tax cuts, I definitely think we should begin to shift the burden onto tariffs. We should really reevaluate any multilateral free trade agreement. I think these multilateral agreements are usually where most of the issues are. They become managed trade. It becomes more complex to trade. I think we should focus, if any free trade agreement is to exist, we should focus on bilateral free trade agreements where the principle of reciprocity is upheld, and we approach reciprocity in trade. If they're going to have, certain types of subsidies and tariffs and taxes and protections for industries in their countries, we need to reciprocate the same. We can't just open our doors for trade while other countries do not open their doors for us to trade. There needs to be a degree of reciprocity. As far as this comes to young people, I think it's another plank in the economic agenda to bring prosperity back to the American people. I think a lot of Americans, young Americans, again, are struggling with stagnant wages and rising costs. And they obviously, if they are working, which is a big if, and if they're working a job on the books, they're certainly going to see a huge chunk of their paycheck go to Uncle Sam, and they see very little in return for it. We have crumbling infrastructure. We have open borders. Our country is basically falling apart at the seams, yet we're continuing to pay more and more and receive less and less. And our money that we do see is going overseas. It's going to fund Zelensky. It's going to fund the Palestinians. It's going to fund a whole range of foreign groups and foreign nations and NGOs and the UN. And we're not seeing that money used here at home. So I think many Americans are waking up to this situation. It's infuriating them, young and old. And I think any appeal to lower our taxes and change how we do business here and shift back to our model of tariffs, I think it's going to be welcomed. I think it's going to lead to prosperity. And I really look forward to it happening.
Yeah. And I feel like at this point, we could simply start by not sending money to Ukraine. We could start by not sending billions of dollars to other countries, close our southern border, and reinvigorate our economy here. Okay, so we talked about young people. So one young person who is clearly one of these radical leftists is Ilhan Omar's daughter. She says she's homeless, cries poverty after suspension from $90K per year college over anti-Israel protests, according to the New York Post. She says, all of my SHIT is thrown in a random lot. It's pretty horrible, says the disgraced student still supported by her Democratic Squad member mom. Her mom says she is, quote, enormously proud of her daughter. So what are your thoughts on this young lady leading these liberals at Columbia?
Well, she represents the worst of the worst. As far as I'm concerned, her mother is an illegal immigrant who lied to immigrate to this country. She should be kicked out of the Congress. She should be denaturalized and deported along with her daughter. Maybe I'm a little radical, but I think we need some radical solutions to deal with the radical left, which her daughter represents, to the extreme. I mean, you have these effectively these limousine liberals who go to these expensive colleges, whose parents make a ton of money. Her mother grifts and milks the taxpayers and milks donors and lives off the largesse of the left-wing, aristocracy of this country, and she wants to pretend she's some kind of little, revolutionary on college campus. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. I'm glad she got kicked out. I think her whining is pathetic. And again, I think we need to seriously look at a lot of people that are like her, who are here illegally, who are here on either student visas or just straight up illegal, and get rid of them. I mean, I would end all foreign student visas. I think it's ridiculous that we give spots in our prestigious and expensive colleges to foreigners when there are many Americans who would like to go to these schools and receive a good education, and who are prevented from doing so because their spot was replaced by someone coming here on a foreign visa, who's then going to take their education, go back to their own country, and do nothing to enrich our country and only enrich theirs. So I think the entire concept of these student visas needs to be ended. I think a lot of these people have been involved in a lot of these, disruptions on campus, a lot of these radical protests long before the Israeli-Palestinian issue flared up. I mean, they were involved in every, left-wing
George
cause
Floyd,
du jour.
BLM.
Yeah, exactly. BLM, George Floyd, abortion, whatever it is. I mean, this is an issue that's been going on for years. So, get rid of all their student visas, kick them out of the country, kick out all the DACA kids, kick out all the illegals. And you know what? We need to stop subsidizing these schools that allow it. A lot of these schools, they receive tons of federal funding. They should, no longer have access to those federal funds. We should no longer be underwriting student loans that go towards left-wing schools. We should be only doing that. We shouldn't be doing that at all, but if we're going to do it, we should only be allowing it for more conservative and traditional-minded schools, which do exist, more Christian colleges and the like. But we should really come down hard on higher education, because they've been a breeding ground for this sort of left-wing indoctrination. And hell, look at their endowments. You have schools like here, even in NYU here in the city, they buy up tons of property in Manhattan. They don't pay property tax. They avoid a lot of the taxes. I think we should start taxing a lot of these college endowments. Tax these endowments. What are they doing besides perpetuating a left-wing agenda? Okay, you want to enjoy a left-wing agenda? Let's tax you for it. I mean, I think that's a sensible thing. And we should honestly pass laws that ban a lot of this un-American, anti-patriotic sentiment that's taught and spread and disseminated on these college campuses. I think we really need to take a hard stance and a hard look at how these higher education institutions are operating, because they are taking young people who may have gone there either conservative or politically neutral, and they're pumping out radicals. They're pumping out radicals even in a sort of psychological sense, where people will go there and they come out and now they're identifying as trans and they're trying to cut off parts of their body. So we need to take a serious look at this. I think it goes beyond Ilhan Omar's daughter. I think she's part of the problem, but she's only the tip of the spear, so to speak.
Only the tip of the spear. The fact that she's only the tip of the spear is so disturbing, because it's schools like this in New York, NYU, Columbia, but it's also schools, even in conservative states, that are so liberal that the parents think, oh, I'll just send my kid to university of whatever. And then they take out huge student loans. The school is liberal. They're indoctrinated. And like you said, a lot of foreign students who come here who, let's say they get a I don't know if it would be what type of scholarship it would be, but I know some of them do then leave, go back to their country, and they never actually pay back what they were supposed to, because they can't be held to account here. If you're in the US, I think they kind of can enforce it, where you eventually would have that debt that you'd have to pay back. But I know someone who went to another country, and she was literally telling me, well, if I stay in this country, I just won't pay back the loan. So I'm probably just going to go back to the US. And it's like, that is just crazy. You basically just came here and said, I'm just going to pocket, not that these degrees are worth tons, but technically they are. And so basically you just pocketed all of that money in that education and took off, while all of these Americans are then saddled with that kind of debt. And it's awful. It's awful the way that it's exploded and the way
then they
that
get the
foreign
debt,
people take
and then
advantage.
the jobs they're competing for are taken by immigrants, illegal or legal. So the whole system is just designed to demoralize and to bankrupt Native American, native-born American students and citizens. I mean, the whole system is corrupt. You're pointing out fraud, which is a huge part of it. And listen, who can blame them? I mean, we're the stupid ones for allowing such a system. Other countries wouldn't do it. I can't go to China, get a subsidized education, and then come back here and then become a doctor. I mean, that wouldn't work. No other country would allow this. We allow it because, out of some kind of misguided sense of compassion and generosity or whatever else. But the entire system is completely broken from the top down. And you also brought up a really interesting point with a lot of this stuff happening in conservative or red states. And, it's been talked about a lot. I'm in New York. Maybe I'm more keen to what the left does, but I think there are a lot of our friends in more red states, more conservative states, who can be a little bit naive about what's happening, and they allow a lot of this sort of left-wing agenda to go on rather quietly, under the radar in their own states, and they need to start getting more serious and tackling it because they do have government, a more conservative Republican-dominated government in many of these states, and they have means to tackle it where they can. So I think there's always an issue that you don't really recognize the problem until it's too late, and many people in red states, they have it a little bit too good, and they sometimes forget that these problems don't just pop up overnight. They happen over years under the radar, and they need to stamp them out as soon as it comes to the surface, because allowing it to go on is an issue. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right now, because it's like, even if you were, like I was saying, I'm in Texas, if you're going to a big Texas school, a lot of the donors are conservative. A lot of the people who maybe have some pull at the university are conservative, but somehow they still end up with all these liberal professors. So now's the time to step in for these parents. But Gavin, thank you so much for your thoughts today. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to these radical conservative Zoomers gaining influence as they get older, and hopefully Trump will turn things around for us.
Thank you, Danielle. You and me, you and I both.
Well, that wraps up today's show. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, all of the places. I'm at Danielle D'Souza Gill. I would love to hear from you guys. That's where you can find my content, videos, thoughts, all of those things. Well, I will see you guys tomorrow. MAGA.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.